CRM, much to the horror of many catalogers. So we combined the rules together, and we came up with a practical set of procedures. And our procedures are available by talking to us. We can send you a copy. So some of the things we made up were, these are collections, they're not monographs, they're not serials, they're bib level C, a made-up multi-part group of items that were not originally published or distributed or produced together. The date status, good cataloging stuff, is the first date and the last date of the collection. The field 100 is the collector. Our collector, Jane Doe, gets a subfield E, collector. And Jane Doe gets also 245, the Jane Doe volume of American songs and piano music, or a description of whatever it is. The spine title often says music. Not all that important. Sometimes it says vocal music. Pretty exciting. The 254. When you have a collection, many times it's from the United States. Many times it's various places of publication and various publishers. Very seldom it's all the same thing. And again, the range of dates goes in that field. We decided the format of the 300 field was 1 volume, 10 items, or whatever you have. And it's important to put in binder's tickets. Yes, that's spelled right. So it's tickets. Again, as a way of identifying where this person was binding their music together. Field 505 is the contents note, and we've used the enhanced format so that when you do an OCLC search for a title, you actually get the titles from 505 fields, which you bump into accidentally and you say, why did I get this? Because it just gives you the Jane Doe collection of, I wonder, why did I do this? You can read through it and find out the answer. So we put plate numbers and series and wolf numbers in case you have one. I had one volume that had all sorts of wolf numbers. And there's the format that we use for that. Field 650, the subject heading, this is one of Andrea's, my favorite of Andrea's. So important concepts in your book, it can be brought out. Feel free. We also put in every one of our records bound sheet music as a genre, local genre, so that you can go to OCLC and in the genre field, either one of them down below, you can put in bound sheet music and see what we've been doing. And I think you only get us because we're the people doing that. Andrea, more than I, because of her clientele, likes lithographers. So if you have a good lithographer like Mr. Currier and Ives or something, that goes in field 700 or 710. Searching. What are we doing? OCLC, I use OCLC to search for fonts that I can't really read. And if you look at the volumes, they have the most innovative squiggles that they call letters. It makes Fraktur look easy. And sometimes OCLC will actually tell you what the letters are because somebody else has figured it out. So I use OCLC as a search mechanism. And we also use that for the authority file. If you're looking for information about the person you're researching, Google is the best place that I find to start. You can also use Ancestry Library Edition, which all of our libraries might have, free genealogy searches, even though genealogists only like dates and places often. Google expands on that. If you don't have Ancestry, the next best one is Family Search, which is free. Free is good. And that's the Mormon genealogy site. You have to sign up, but once you sign up, nothing bad happens. Interesting to compare the answers between Ancestry and Family Search, and there's quite a difference, and both of them help you figure out who you have. And the backlog. Go home and catalog the backlog. That's my message to you all. And there we are. Very suggested we take some questions.
Yeah, if anyone has questions or comments, we ran overtime at MLA, of course, so we didn't get any of the usual very helpful interaction. And I'd love to hear anything anyone might have to say or ask or Ann?
I love this. But I have questions. When you're tracing lithographers, etc., do you set the threes to keep track of them, or you just do somewhere in this volume there's a lithographer represented?
These, as a collection volume, we consider the subfield 3 to, in our shop anyway, to be more when you have, 5 different volumes on the same fib record. We figure as one volume on one record. I might consider using it if I had 3 volumes on the same record, which in some cases we do. We do get series of these volumes, and they may actually say volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. And if it's not too cumbersome, we put it together on one volume. In that case, I might do that. Yep. I haven't ever, but I might.
It's like the donkey subject heading. The book is not about donkeys. It's just one song in the collection. So that.
But there's a really fabulous picture.
I'm curious how you assess the value of these and whether some of them are classified as rare, and if many of these, I would think, are one of a kind, right? They're very unique.
Well, Robert, if you want to weigh in on that, or I don't want to just talk.
Well, they are unique because they're unique, and we keep them. I'm not sure where we keep them. Some of them are locked up in our cage as rare books. Some of them are on the shelf, which is unavailable to the public, so that they're under supervision. And something like Julia Ward Howe is especially good, or Emily Dickinson.
Yeah. I mean, everything I know is rare. But I suppose in a circulating library you would want to weigh the local information that you have in hand and how unique that is against the people who are going to want to actually look at the music that you have in the volume, and you'll just have to make your decisions based on how the condition of the volume. A lot of these volumes are in very bad shape, and I wouldn't want to circulate them because scores just fall out in the middle. But that's a question. Fortunately, I don't have to. I don't have to deal with that one.
So that's another thing, you keep them in the original binding, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
That's critical.
You know, that was the one thing that really broke my heart. At the MLA presentation, at least 8 people came up to me afterwards saying, I don't believe it. We had, 50 of these and we disbound them all and just cataloged the music. And I thought, the entire context gone. They threw away the bindings so that they didn't know who owned them. And unless they were actually, some of them are inscribed individually. So they might have been able to at least figure out one that was inscribed, but the entire context lost. The context in these volumes is what I would consider to be the most important thing, because it's the context that gives us, the detective information about the individuals who put the volume together. What did they choose? Why did they choose it? One of the other people at the MLA presentation mentioned to me that she'd heard that a lot of young ladies in America, this might not necessarily be an English thing, would have their volumes beautifully bound as they were going into the courting years, and they would put it on their piano. And when suitors would come by to hang out, the suitors would go and they would look at the volume on the piano, and they would go through it, and they would say, we share a joy in the Battle of Prague. I think this woman speaks to my heart, not realizing that everyone else had the Battle of Prague. But the context of that someone was able to actually get a snapshot of who a young lady might be from looking at the contents of the volume, I think pretty much says what the value of these volumes is. There are women here who nobody ever hears anything. These are the daughters of, in some case, very powerful people, and in some case, we have some volumes that I wouldn't even say were middle class. Who is ever going to hear anything about this woman? And here is this wonderful little snapshot of who she really was and what she valued at that time.
I was wondering about the in-discovery public side of the cataloging. With a 505, it's sometimes difficult to access things because. So I was wondering, do you use, for example, a lot of 700 fields to make it more standard?
We don't. There's no reason why you wouldn't have to. But we don't do that. The amount of time that it takes to put that all together. And in fact, we take the composer and the arranger, all of that. It's just in the statement of responsibility. We do not even put in 700s for the composers, which, if we had more time, we certainly would recommend that. So that's a choice you have to make based on the amount of time that you have.
But the composers are accessible through OCLC as a composer search.
Author, yeah, if you put in an author search, it will search a subfield R in the 505s, which is great. As long as you just search simply, use the last name, you're good. One
of the things we found out was that subfield G does not search, even though we were pleading with J. Whites at OCLC. There must be a way.
Well, the subfield G is...
There is not a way.
Miscellaneous.
Even keywords?
No, keyword doesn't work. Nothing works.
We still think that it's valuable to have that information because the vast majority of people who are into this stuff, they care about who the publisher is. And they see that we put a date in and they say, well, I know better than that. So we keep the plate number in there and everything so that they can check it themselves. And I think that's valuable to put that amount of time in.
What if you don't know who the owner was? You must run into cases like that.
We got plenty of those.
So just go back and do it.
Yes, I just did one that is just blank, and I just used invented a title, volume of songs, and used the same procedures.
Yeah, we have a whole list in the procedures thanks to Robert's recommending that we put together lots of examples of what to do when you have a collector, what to do when you don't have a collector, and what the important elements, the DAX elements are of devising a title like that.
So since you're kind of creating kind of like a hybrid content standard here, Well, first of all, do you feel comfortable doing that in the sense more so because these are unique materials that nobody else will be adding holdings on?
Absolutely.
And for that matter, I'm also just curious, what are you putting in the subfield E of the 040?
In the subfield E of the 040, I am putting RDA and DAX because I am following the RDA format. You know, I'm not using any abbreviations. I'm using 3 XX fields. I'm doing, as far as possible, I'm doing everything RDA, so I figure that's safe. But then I'm also putting a subfield E for DAX.
And I'm putting RDA in spite of what I'm doing. But we must remain flexible. We're cataloging so that people can discover.
Yeah. And also, just to follow up on what Robert was talking about, and here we have the difference between DAX and RDA. When he was talking about the 264, I don't use a 264. I put a subfield F with the date range at the end of the 245, which is a more DAX-y kind of way to do it. But either way is perfectly acceptable.
So one of the things, so you're talking about contextualization, and one of the things that I wonder is these volumes contextualized within the greater collection of a particular owner. Like what gets in the book and what doesn't get in the book, because I want to see how many copies of Battle of Prague did not get in there. And so I wondered if anybody has been working within like big collections that have been donated and started looking at those sorts of issues.
Well, now the Amy Lowell collection is a possible example. The Lowell family was a big Cambridge family, and Amy Lowell, the poet, had 4 very powerful and important brothers and sisters, including somebody who like invented astronomy and one of the presidents of Harvard, I think the Lowell that all the Lowells on the Harvard campus was named after was Amy's brother. And I think her father was also very important. So they had quite a stash, and Harvard got the collection. When I discovered these volumes, they were separated from everything else, but the modern curator said she thought that there was music involved with that too. I haven't looked into it, but that's a possibility. I've never thought to investigate that. I think that's a very interesting thing to look into. Hard to find a collection that large, but you know, they're out there.
I was just wondering, this made me think of early music and the collections of bound, part songs and things like that. Has anybody ever used this approach to analyze or contextualize an early music?
If we got a volume of 17th century, early, late 16th century part songs, we would consider that to be important enough to go back to the original analytic method. Mm-hmm. Just because those are so hard to find. Where there's
a notable collector and there's historical significance, or is this just too old people to know?
Well, there's another possibility that people can use. You could do this volume, and at least in our system, we can only barcode one thing. So in the old days, we used to barcode, when we did the analytic method, we would barcode the first item in the volume, and all of the other items in the volume would refer back to that item. You could create a full record like this with all of the information, and then you could individually catalog each item and connect them to this as a main record. That is something that I did once with it was an 18th century collection. It wasn't one of the Custis ones, but it was another 18th century collection, and there was enough bibliography links and Wolf links and all that sort of thing that I thought it would just look too crowded to try to do it. And so I thought I would try it that way, and it seems to have worked out pretty well. It's been circulated, it's been found.
If you search on OCLC for bound volumes, you find all sorts of techniques. Some people are using 700 composer title fields in all cases. Other people aren't. Other people aren't using the fancy
aren't putting the
505,
contents in at all.
And so we first started off by calling our procedures what, best practices. But then we thought, there's only 2 of us.
Suggestions.
So we brought it back to reality. So this is our way of doing it. Hopefully, maybe it'll catch on. One never knows.
One other question, which was, is this discoverable in Archive Grid?
I don't know. I think that Harvard does things with material that tapes out, but I really don't know the answer to that. If you give me your card at some, or your email, I'll look into that and answer you. Anybody else?
Last question.
Yeah, out of the books you've been cataloging, are there any that you feel worth digitizing?
Oh, the Souvenir of the Confederacy, absolutely. That volume is unbelievable. Not only from a printing standpoint, because those people were printing on toilet paper, they were printing with ink that was probably made out of mud. They were using movable type. I mean, when the Civil War hit, I don't know how it was in the other printing industries, but in music, they had very little. There were some publishing activity already down in Georgia, and I think New Orleans had a pretty thriving publishing industry, but they had nothing like what was happening in the North. And so when the blockades hit, they didn't get paper, they didn't get the music, most of all. They didn't get paper, they didn't get ink, they didn't get just the basic stuff that you would use to bind these volumes. So they improvised. And this volume is an absolutely fascinating, it just in and of itself as an artifact of that time period. But the contents, perfect example of where context is something that you could write a whole paper about. There are all of these southern versions, what were they called? The exotics, I think. Some of you may be familiar with this. Augusta, Georgia, the Blackmar Publishing Company had a series called The Exotics, and a lot of this was material, Schubert. It was stuff that they couldn't get from the northern publishing industry anymore, so they were getting the music somehow. I don't know how, that's somebody else's job. But they were publishing it in their own versions with their own texts often. Fascinating stuff. So I highly recommend it, and it's full of patriotic, Confederate rah-rah songs. So that one, I think I would recommend that above everything in my collection. Anything in your collection that you think the world needs to see?
Julia Ward Howe.
Yeah.
So you got both sides of Civil War, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. That's for sure.
I want to thank our speakers.